We will hear the candidate speeches in the order that they are seated, working from my right to my left. And we will begin with "and" in a moment. Candidates will answer in a slightly different way. Unfortunately, Deputy Moore, who is number 8, is going to be asked to answer the first question this evening. I have put her on notice on that. Questions will be taken 2 at a time. That does not mean that one person asks 2 questions. I'd like to have as many people as possible fielding questions to the candidates. So you get the chance to ask 1 question, but we will take 2 at a time, and those questions will be answered by candidates within 2 minutes. The warning bell will sound again 20 seconds before those 2 minutes are finished, and also when their response time is up. Okay, on another matter, and perhaps contrary to popular belief, we do have toilets in St Lawrence. If anybody needs to use our facilities, they are through the door on my right-hand side. Please also note that if we need to evacuate for an emergency, the front door and the door to the right are the routes out of here. So before we begin, candidate Ant Lewis has asked me to say a few words on his behalf, which I understand all the other candidates are happy for me to do. As you may be aware, Ant has aphasia, a speech and language disorder caused by a serious stroke 10 years ago. He is taking a full part in the senatorial campaign, but his difficulties with language mean that the traditional Hustings format of questions without notice is not practical for him. So this evening he will not be answering questions. Aphasia is a condition that affects communication, but not ability. Therefore, Ant will be responding to questions online on his Facebook page, and he will also be holding a number of surgeries which are better formats for his particular disability. Ant has asked me to thank you for your understanding. So we will now move on to the candidates, and I will ask Ant to open the evening with his speech. Thank you, Ant.
You have never seen a candidate like me before. I am different. I have a different campaign and a different voice, but different is what Jersey needs. My stroke has left me disabled, but it has given me courage, determination and new insight. I will represent those who, like me, don't have a voice. Not just the disabled, but everyone who feels that today's politicians don't speak for them. My focus includes the environment, equality, and community. We need to improve the community of Jersey. We need to improve the environment. It will cost money, but it is an investment for my children and your children. There is no clear voice for the environment in the current states. That has to change. Equality. I bring a new perspective, one formed by both success and hardship. I believe mental health provision must be higher up the political agenda. More understanding and reduced stigma. Where we see inequality and stigma in Jersey, it should be fought. We are improving and have more cosmopolitan living. To create a more equal island. The dangers of having an island of haves and have-nots. I believe that the most marginalized and downtrodden members of our society have something to contribute. From the inmate at Lemoy to the homeless man in the parade. We all have insights and abilities to help make Jersey a better place to live. Everyone has skills and talents. Everyone. We need a system that allows those talents to flourish. The first step is to break down our own stigmas. That is a role of education and defining common goals. Our children and their schooling hold the key. It is then identifying those abilities and channeling them where they are most needed. We need more social enterprises to create businesses and programs that build on our social capital, like my campaign headquarters, the Beresford Street Kitchen. Communities working together makes us all stronger, and it starts at school. We also need greater recognition of support. The voluntary sector. With more effort from the states, we can better coordinate the work that charities do. I will be the first person with aphasia to stand for the states. I appreciate that makes me different. You may ask, how will I be able to represent you? With modern technology, I can. But for more information, please visit my website, www.andlewis.com. I hope that I will be able to represent all islanders, including those who don't always fit in with the norm. You have 8 votes for senator. Please use one of those on someone who will truly represent change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I call Senator Sarah Ferguson.
Good evening, Madam Connétable and parishioners of St. Lawrence. It's suggested that we must have unlimited immigration to have a sufficiently large working population to support the ageing population. A fine example of a Ponzi scheme. The proposed immigration policy is that immigration should not exceed the average of that since 2001, 700 people a year. That means by 2035, we will require 185 Le Marais blocks and 6 new primary schools. Where will we house them? We built 1,261 houses over the past 4 years, compared with an actual immigration of 4,200 over the same period. We are trying to squeeze most homes into the urban areas, but we need more sites in the villages to give the children of parishioners a chance to live in their home parish. The New Island Plan gives us a chance to identify sites. One of the indirect results of the increasing population is the amount of sea lettuce in St. Aubyn's Bay. We need a concerted effort by farmers, utilities, and the community to deal with it. Farmers have begun to reduce their use of chemicals, and some are conducting experiments to move from chemical to regenerative farming. The indications from the results look very promising. Reduced costs, reduced need for staff, better quality, earlier crops, and better drainage of fields. Howard Davis Farm was set up as an educational and, I understand, a research station for agriculture. It's time to bring it back into that use. To assist research into better agricultural methods. We have a hemp farm, and I understand that somebody wants to become a tea planter as he's experimenting with Camellia sinensis. We have fantastic orchids. What else can we grow? And let us not talk about the problem of the ageing population. That's rubbish. Who is looking after the children in the holidays? The grandparents. Who is doing much of the volunteering in the island? The ageing population. Who is doing much of the caring in the island? The ageing population. That is, when they're not climbing Kilimanjaro, hiking through the Pampas, or trekking across Iceland. It is time we stopped calling them a problem and started paying more attention to the way they are treated. We also need change. Let's bring it on. Please vote for Sarah Ferguson for change with common sense.
Thank you, Senator Ferguson. I call Mr. Frank Luce.
Good evening, St. Lawrence. My name is Frank Luce. Thank you for attending the Hustings tonight, and thank you for ensuring that your name be on the electoral roll, enabling you to vote. Your vote and how you vote has never been so important. We are facing a landmark election. You are going to shape the future of the next government for all Islanders. You, the minority, are going to carry the apathetic majority into better government by your choice of candidates before you tonight. Never before has the gap between the government and the electorate been greater. Islanders are so appalled by the antics of the present sitting states members, they have turned their back on politics and have lost total faith and feel angry that their opinions are completely ignored by the elected members once they get into government. Frankly, reading letters to the editor in the Jersey Evening Post should be compulsory reading for all states members. The appalling successive low voting turnout since the war is testimony to the contempt Islanders have for standing government. This is a situation can only be reversed by better government made up of members who first and foremost listen to the people and shape their policies to make government inclusive to the electorate. Then and only then will the general public feel included, in touch, and this will result in a greater desire to vote. In the meantime, and for this most important election, your vote will speak for all Islanders. Potential voters see the system of government in Jersey as bad. They want nothing to do with it. That was an opinion held by me. However, the present Assembly have horrified me to such an extent that I am now before you asking for your vote so that I may represent the thoughts, feelings and opinions of Islanders in the Chamber itself. I want to have a strong and significant input in two long outstanding issues: the appalling hospital saga and the independent inquiry into the lifeboat power and personality struggle the present government does not wish to happen. To face in the new Assembly the looming priorities of Brexit and the population control, and ensure that the agriculture and tourism are better supported to form a holy trinity of business sectors along with the finance industry. I want to work for a listening States Chamber that puts Islanders first, and for that I need your confidence and support, and of course your vote. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak to you, and I hope to meet you and be of service to you for the next momentous 4 years. For your ballot paper, the name is Luce, Frank Luce. Thank you and good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Luce. I call Mr. Stevie Ocean.
Bonsoir, Madame Commissar, les committee. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to remain sitting because if I stand up, first of all, you can hear me, but I can't hear myself. I'm 6'2", I'm the tallest candidate here, and I'm not going to go through that again. So what are we going to talk about? First of all, I'm going to talk about what I did back in the by-election in 2016, because this is important. First of all, I got onto Google in the United States, and after 2 days of arguing, and I mean arguing, I achieved something by having the letters UK removed from the 5 of our islands. That was the first thing I'd done. Secondly, and in this election, I'm actually in contact with LinkedIn in America. I already have been, and I'm re-educating them to make them understand we are not part of the UK. The same will go on with Twitter, and the same will apply to YouTube as well. And the Royal Mail. I've actually been in contact with the CEO of Royal Mail, Moya Green. Nobody will give me her number, but I found it, her private number, and I've been talking to her this afternoon. She couldn't even give me the answers I required to let me know why. That there's this misapprehension that Jersey is part of the UK. So I hope to get the answers very, very shortly. Also, I actually made history. 2 years ago, there was confusion on the ballot paper. It cost me votes and a lot of confusion, and I don't like doing this to people. So I made up my mind that this would not happen in this election. What I did is I put my case forward. A member of government represented me in front of the law officers, and I won my case. I was being classed as Peter Mac, and I'm not Peter Mac, far from it. In fact, I actually included my equity card, which was current, and I have personal liability insurance of £10 million, and that makes me different from Peter Mac. So on the ballot paper, you will now see Ocean Stevie, and if I happen to be elected, I actually will be Senator Ocean, which will be fantastic. The manifesto, very, very briefly, what I what I've done is I've done a few printed copies for you, which if you'd like to pick up afterwards, you're more than welcome to have. Contact me by phone or email, and I'll make sure I send you the link so you can print it off. It's gone into very, very great detail, and it was impossible to fit into the booklet. It's over 1,000 words, 4 pages long, but it will all be explained. So what do I want to do? Well, you see, I don't make promises or pledges. I get on with things, and that is the most important thing here. And I've achieved an awful lot in a very, very short time. I want to see Jersey recognised throughout the world for what it is, not part of the United Kingdom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ocean. I now call Ms. Moz Scott.
Thank you, St Lawrence. The States Assembly needs fresh talent to bring new drive and direction to the Council of Ministers, because its seasoned politicians are part of our problem and not the solution. It needs people with a track record for getting results, who have had success in the world outside the States Assembly, including of applying laws and managing finances. I'm an Oxford graduate and a former tax lawyer. I've been a partner, owner and director of a major Jersey law firm and trust company business, which had over 100 employees. I'm also a leadership trainer who not only knows how to use teamwork to get results, but has shown others how to do so. I'm good at finding the best solutions to complex problems, which is why I am standing. What I don't find easy is to explain in 3 minutes how proper leaders would sort out this mess. The current Council of Ministers has allowed the waste of huge sums of public money while spending money on spin and approving cuts to valuable services and support, like withdrawing funding for family nursing and nursery fees. I'm a quick learner. I don't need to be an experienced politician to get the job done. Plenty of politicians without my professional background and training in Jersey law haven't. If elected, I will work towards a way of stopping the waste of public money and making our economy sounder and more productive, because we need funds to pay for things like affordable housing, not for another quango that passes the buck. I will do this in a way that is fairer on taxpayers' pockets and on dedicated states workers. My love of this island and my voluntary work as chairman of the St Brellard's Bay Association has led me to learn more about the island plan than most states members. If elected, I'll work on a plan that actually supports affordable housing and on policies that are more than wish lists, and on more effort to protecting the island's scenic beauty, reservoirs, heritage and other limited resources, so that islanders can move forward into the future securely with our own special identity. Most importantly, if elected, I will deliver a proposition to reform the States Assembly, partly to ensure the new Council of Ministers and scrutineers act together as a team to deliver the results you actually need. I'm standing for Senator because of a compelling need to serve, to use my legal knowledge, real-world experience and skills to do what's best for all islanders in the best possible way. This is all I can deliver in the time allowed to speak. If elected, I will deliver much, much more to you. I'm good value. Please look at my online manifesto at www.votemos.je to find out how, or please come and have a word with me. Please consider me for just one of your votes as Senator on the 16th of May. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. I call Senator Ian Gorst.
Madam Le Connétable, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I stood for elected office to make a difference and to provide hope for the future. This election is absolutely about change. As Chief Minister, I've guided our island through some of the most difficult economic and social challenges that we have faced. But over the next 4 years, we face challenges that will set the future course of our community for many years to come. We face the uncertainty of Brexit, we face international uncertainty, and we face the uncertainty of the EU. And of course, at this time, we also recognise that we've suffered the effect of the global financial crisis. And as Chief Minister and a father, I understand the effect that the Great Recession has had on family budgets. Jersey is a great place, and we have made significant progress across our community, but I'm not satisfied. There is more that I want to see achieved, and that's why during this election I'm talking about three main aims. Effective economic leadership. That means protecting and building on the many good things that we find in island life. So supporting the businesses that are already here and encouraging improved productivity and diversification. Because our economic strength has not happened by accident. I will continue to represent Jersey's economy and way of life on the international stage, defending our reputation in the EU and elsewhere and promoting investment and trade. But I want, and I have always wanted, to ensure that all islanders share in that success. That's why, secondly, I want to continue to see islanders' lives improve, building on what we've achieved so far. But there is much more to do. That's why I'm proposing during this election an Affordable Housing Commission, a coming together of the community to drive out costs and to increase supply. A refocusing of the competition regulator, driving down the cost of living. A building on the long-term care scheme, providing government support at parish level. And post the care inquiry, I'm proposing a new contract with children and young people. And thirdly, I want to see the transformation of government and the public sector. We started that reform, but there is much more to do, driving out waste and refocusing on serving all islanders, because I believe that when we work together, we can achieve change and a better way. I stand for hope for the future so that you don't have to risk yours. I would appreciate one of your votes on May the 16th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Gorst. I now call Mr. Gino Rizzoli.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gino Rizzoli. I'm a local businessman, live in St Helier for more than 30 years. I'm married with 3 children, 2 of which are studying at the universities of Reading and Bristol. I want to start this by saying that I've studied human behaviour for the last 25 years. It is my interest. We put men on the moon, we sent satellites to Mars. Ask yourself why we don't get to the bottom of politics. I'll explain how politics actually works. First, we have rich people. Today, they have been joined by large businesses and corporations. Both want to increase shareholder value. Now, that's fine as a goal, but politicians have allowed them to cross the line. Now, why? As many of our senior politicians make their living from these companies, it's easy to see why corporations are so successful at delivering corporate policy. Politicians must deliver or they're out. Simple as that. The rest of us who work indirectly work for these people. So we too feel vulnerable for our jobs. This is the simplicity of how system works. Fear and greed are at the sponsoring factors of politics today. Everyone feels powerless to make the necessary changes. Your government will, if you give me your vote and the authority to make the necessary changes, government has an insatiable appetite for money. We need financial accountability. This will stop the colossal waste and the detail of how the government spends your money is what they're doing and not what they say they're doing. Our accounting methods are not fit for purpose. Accountability will drive out corruption. There is a missing ingredient in today's policies, and that's care. Unless every policy is driven by caring government, we are doomed to failure. Care and fairness must be at the heart of every policy. It's the one thing that unites our differences. Without it, there is always a cost. Unfairness is the reason for crime. It's the reason for poor mental health, and it's the reason why our children are so confused. There is always a cost, never a free lunch. To all those in government that are now stood down, I thank them, but there is a lot to do. Affordable housing, fair taxation and immigration. I can make large contributions to education and health, particularly those who are left wanting, young who are left wanting. A vote for me will transform government. I have the leadership qualities and the vision. I want Jersey to be the envy of the international circuit for the very best reasons. What unites us is not left and right politics, it's kindness and fairness. Together we become limitless. The tourism industry will be replenished by the example we set. Welcome to my new world where people truly come first and the economy is in service to that end. Please give me one of your votes on election day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rizzoli. I call now Deputy Christina Moore.
Good evening, St Lawrence. The happy occasion of the birth of the latest member of our royal family this week has prompted me to talk to you tonight about children and how they fit into my vision for the island. Children are our future, so rather than being seen and not heard, they must be at the forefront of our decision making. They will, after all, have to live with the consequences. Happy, healthy and well-educated children grow up to be productive adults who contribute to society, and as we face a digital age with greater uncertainty over what the jobs of the future will be, we need to invest in more than ever in our next generation. The publication of the Care Inquiry last year told us clearly how we, as a community, had failed vulnerable children in the past. We've learned from that inquiry, and together we as a community are changing. We've invested to strengthen services, and I hope that I will be part of a council of ministers that will do more if I'm elected. Most children, of course, grow up in families, and this is one reason why we have to take action over housing provision. The high cost of putting a roof over a family's head places some in a position where they have to take 2 or 3 jobs. Time with their children then becomes increasingly difficult. Childhood obesity is another issue to tackle. 1 in 5 4 to 5-year-olds and 1 in 3 10 to 11-year-olds are currently overweight. That's why, along with Constable Pallet, I will see that every child takes part in a daily mile when they're at school. This simple project encourages sporting confidence, it reduces obesity, and it also boosts attainment as the children taking part are noticeably more alert due to regular exercise in the fresh air. Children are a key part of my campaign, which is about balancing competing priorities to find a better way and a sustainable future for our island. The economy is a critical part of that balance. The more successful it is, the more jobs are created and the more revenue we'll raise to provide healthcare, education and help to those in need. Our beautiful environment and coastline is cherished by us all, and we need to preserve it for the next generation. This means improving water, air and soil quality. If we take on this priority, we can reduce traffic congestion, minimise waste and still create affordable homes for people and families. Our community is safe and friendly, and this also needs to be protected. I will champion the needs of our elders. Our system can support them well, and we should leave it in good shape for their grandchildren when they reach retirement. Ladies and gentlemen, I know that you look for experienced and compassionate leadership, and I hope that you will use one of your votes for more for Jersey.
Thank you, Deputy Moore. I now call Deputy Simon Bree to my left.
Good evening, Madame la Connétable, ladies and gentlemen. I am Simon Bree. I'm proud to be a Jerseyman and I'm honoured to be a Deputy for St Clement. I'm Chairman of the Economic Affairs Scrutiny Panel, the Future Hospital Review Panel and the Machinery of Government Review Panel, and Vice Chairman of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. I have been working hard on your behalf to hold this government to account. There are major issues facing our island which will have a direct impact on the daily lives of every one of us. Unless we tackle these now, our quality of life and our island will change forever. Brexit is looming with its unknown impact on our economy. We must diversify our economy and support farming, tourism, the digital sector, small business and startups to reduce over-reliance on the finance industry. Population growth, if left unchecked and uncontrolled, will have serious consequences on our quality of life. Work permits, which are seasonal and time-limited, are the only real solution. Families are trying to buy their first homes are finding it impossible. Government must support parishes in delivering small-scale, affordable home developments to give islanders hope for a better future. Much sooner these than large-scale developments of concrete and steel. We must reduce the financial burden on middle to low-income families by reducing the cost and size of the public sector. This does not mean reducing services, and simply raising taxes is not the answer. Removal of GST on food and children's clothing would be a step in the right direction. And government must stop wasting money. £26 million on a new hospital without a spade being put in the ground. £800,000 on an aircraft registry with only one aircraft to show for it. Countless millions spent on UK consultants, with more spend just announced by the new chief executive. Politics in Jersey has become polarised. Let us together regain the middle ground. Let us have a government that has a social responsibility and is not just some uncaring, soulless corporate entity run by grey-suited accountants whose only concern is to balance the books. Let us have a government that is committed to maintaining and upholding the traditions and customs that make Jersey unique. And let us have a government that actually listens to the people and not just big business. This will need a change in political leadership, and this election offers a real opportunity for that change. It is time for your voice to be heard, and your vote is your voice. But change will only happen if you vote. To the role of Senator, I bring my life and work experience, my political experience, my strong work ethic, and my courage to stand up for what I believe in. Working together, we can make a real positive difference to the lives of every member of our society. I would be honoured to receive your vote. Thank you.
I'm going to call now Deputy Sam Mezek.
Thank you, Madam Connetab. Maybe it's a candidate's car. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here this evening. My name is Sam Mezek, and I've been the Deputy for St Helier No. 2 for the last 4 years. In the States, I've served as Chairman of the Care of Children in Jersey Scrutiny Panel, Vice Chairman of the Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel, and Chairman of the Reform Jersey Party. Outside of the States, I'm a trustee of the St Helier Youth and Community Trust, a founding member of the Living Wage Advisory Board, and Vice Chairman of the Jersey Human Rights Group. I'm standing for Senator because I want to make a difference for the island, and because I want a democratic mandate to force the next States Assembly to put at the top of their list of priorities the aim of improving the standard of living for islanders. Over the last 10 years, whilst wages have stagnated, the gap between the haves and the have-nots has gotten wider. We're now a more unequal society than the UK, and poverty has drastically risen. We've seen many of our public services deteriorate, whilst millions continue to be wasted by the government. People are finding it harder to get by, and there doesn't appear to be any sort of vision from the current government about how we can actually reverse these trends. And I don't believe that words and platitudes are enough. I want action to deal with this. It isn't good enough for candidates to tell you why they want to improve pay, why they want to make housing more affordable, or they want to support businesses, if they have no way of actually knowing that they can achieve any of this if they're elected. And for some politicians, it feels like the word action seems to consist of little more than setting up a new Quango. I think I've shown myself to be a man of action by the number of propositions and questions I've brought forward in the States, more than all States members bar one. I brought forward propositions to increase the minimum wage every single year. I brought the first proposition to achieve marriage equality, and I brought a proposition successfully to prevent discrimination against young people in the minimum wage. And I've always been prepared to work with others who sometimes I might disagree with on many other areas if it's for the benefit of the public who I serve. I'm not interested in shouting from the sidelines. I want to be at the forefront of delivering positive change for the people of Jersey, aimed solely at making your lives better. At the very core of my political philosophy is the belief that politicians should be constantly working for a fairer society that works for everyone. Jersey has the potential to be a beacon of equality, of prosperity, and of environmentalism, if only we had governments with a clear vision of how to get there. So I'm hoping that on the 16th of May, you'll vote for me, Sam Mesek, and your local Reform Jersey candidate, so that we can put that at the top of the state's agenda, improving life for ordinary islanders. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Mesek. I call now Mr. Gerard Broder.
Thank you, Madam the Constable. Prisoners at St Lawrence, good evening. Thank you for coming. I'm Gerard Broder. Now, tonight I wanted to focus on what ministers call achievements. I call them failures. But like the public sector reform, 7 years behind schedule, millions spent and nothing to show for it. Our invisible hospital, 28 million spent, 14 million of that on consultants. What happened if we give them one of our credit cards? Then there's 600 million debt by Andium Homes to build new houses. Or the Condor contract, a conspiracy to prevent people leaving the island. I warned the minister not to sign the contract, as the boat was unsuitable, but he signed it anyway. A contract like the one we had with the filmmaker, it's got more holes than a sieve. Who writes these contracts? The civil service. Are they accountable? No. What are ministers doing about that? Nothing. Ministers tell us immigration helps the economy, but most newcomers are low-wage earners, who, together with their families, cost more in services we supply than they pay in tax. This creates a declining economy, but not the booming one that ministers would have us believe, or the idea that we need more workers due to an ageing population. All that does is turn social security into a larger Ponzi scheme. The problem is a concentration of power. Ministers rule, whilst other members are merely observers. The system is unaccountable and unfit for purpose. I'm here because I want all politicians to have an input into government, not just a handful of ministers. Only that way can they properly serve you. If elected, I will dedicate myself to changing the system. I have the experience. 40 years running my own business, including 15 running the farm after my father died. 13 years as a States member, where I served on the Telecoms, Housing and Public Services Committees. Later served on the Shadow Scrutiny Panel, the Planning Applications Panel. I was Vice Chair of the Environment Scrutiny Panel, member of the Privilege and Procedures Committee, the Public Accounts Committee, the Law Revision Board, and various working parties. I wasn't idle. But even that's not enough. You need the qualifications of a private detective to find the truth amongst all the spin and misinformation. And you need to be tough to take on the establishment. Ask me how I know. I have those qualities. If elected, I promise to drive the two issues that affect everything else: reform of ministerial government and immigration control. I would seek the post of Assistant Chief Minister to achieve that. I would be grateful for your vote, but please remember, make sure others you elect are also committed to changing the system. Otherwise, in 4 years' time, we'll be back here still complaining that nothing has changed. Thank you for listening.
We're getting there, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Broder. I now call Senator Lyndon Farnham.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. In November 2014, I was appointed Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture. Since then, I have worked on behalf of islanders to deliver strong, sustainable growth across all sectors of the economy. Maintaining a strong economy is important, not only because it provides new jobs and career opportunities, but also creates the wealth required to help those in our community who find themselves in need and allow society to develop in the interests and benefit of everyone. My full manifesto is available at my website, and many of you will have picked up, I hope, a copy of my leaflet this evening. But I would like to talk briefly tonight about farming and the environment. In 2016, my department, in partnership with the agriculture industry, launched the Rural Economy Strategy. At the heart of this strategy is a fundamental change in the way farmers are compensated which advances from an area payment scheme where farmers were simply paid a subsidy based on the total area farmed, to a support payment scheme which is dependent upon achieving higher environmental standards, linking together environmental and farming best practices, also known as the LEAF Global Mark. As a result, Jersey will be the first jurisdiction in the world to have the majority of its farms producing foods to these high environmental standards. In addition, the Alternative Crops Initiative within the new strategy has made a promising start. Hemp variety trials in 2017 yielded very well with no chemical input. There are 3 tea plantations, which should please Senator Ferguson, and Howard Davis Farm now hosts only the 2nd honeyberry orchard in the British Isles. And this proves that innovation is alive and well in the sector. Reducing the environmental impact of agriculture is essential, and these new practices are already leading to an improvement in water quality as nitrate levels and the number of pesticides in island streams continue to reduce year on year. Farming is challenging and will continue to need our support, whether it be to produce new high-yielding crops or further investment to pioneer the new introduction of more environmental-friendly practices and technologies. Our growers, our dairy farmers and other land managers are the custodians of our countryside, which underpins our whole infrastructure and the well-being of all islanders and will remain one of my key priorities if re-elected. You may hear many negative comments from candidates this evening, ladies and gentlemen, but Jersey is in good shape. We have strong foundations and we need to keep it that way. To do that, we will need to elect serious people, people with positive vision, highly experienced people, not necessarily political experience, but experience in life, people with a proven track record who will work hard to attain that goal for the benefit of all islanders. And I ask you please to remember that when you vote on May the 16th. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Farnham. Now call Deputy John Fondre.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. For those who don't know me, I'm John Fondre, and it's nice to be on home ground tonight. I'm delighted to have represented you as one of your deputies for the past 12 and a half years, and it's been a privilege and an honour. But tonight, I'm seeking your support to go further and to receive an island mandate. As I hope you know, professionally I'm a chartered accountant, which has proved very useful when dealing with expensive states projects, complex legislation and large sums of expenditure. And over the last 5 years, I'm doing more and more on an international basis, working with both the French-speaking parliamentary side, l'Assemblée parlementaire de la Francophonie, and I also represent Jersey on the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly. And in the context of Brexit, it is critical that we promote the island, explaining why, for example, we are of benefit to the UK. I've been Honorary Secretary of the Vaux Housing Trust for over 20 years, giving me first-hand experience of the difficulties faced in providing social housing on this island. We have to ask the question, why are developers concentrating on luxury development and not focusing on providing first-time buyer homes for locals? With all this experience in mind, I recognise that the standard of living has been falling. You may recall that's actually one of the reasons I did not support the increase in GST from 3 to 5%, because this was an increase in tax on everyone when we could not demonstrate that we were making sufficient savings, appropriate efficiencies to justify that tax increase. I'm hugely passionate about the proper implementation of public sector reform, finally getting rid of the silo mentality, but we need to be clear as to how it's being implemented. Change in the organisational culture is very important, but communication needs to be genuine and sincere. As President of Scrutiny and Chairman of Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, it's been a hard job holding ministers to account over the past 3.5 years. We've looked at things like the Finance Centre, hospital, Brexit, and most recently a high-level look at population policy. Jersey's a beautiful island, and this is a beautiful parish. As some of you remember, about 60 of us created the Millennium Footpath in Waldoaks Valley. Battle of Flowers brings a different group of all ages together every year. And to me, that's the epitome of how well a community can come together and the real benefits of things like the parish system. But if we want to retain all that we believe is good about Jersey, we have to recognise the pressures on us, including housing and population. It is therefore important that we have far better controls, but with some flexibility for business. We will need to grasp the nettle as to how we manage immigration, but firstly we must have good data on what is happening within our overall population. I have proven political and financial experience. Decisions I make are based on hard evidence. I look at the long term, I'm prepared to listen, and I will work hard to get to a solution. And my pledge to you is that if you elect me, I will continue to work hard, to continue to challenge, to continue to act in the best interest of the island, and I hope you will consider me for one of your 8 votes for centre. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Fondre. I now call Connétable Steve Pallet.
Good evening, fellow Connétable and parishioners. My name is Steve Pallet, and I'm currently the Constable of St Brellards. In this election, I'm standing for Senator because I believe I have the energy, leadership and experience to play an active role in the island's next government. In this election, I'm going to be campaigning on a number of issues. My manifesto covers many, but tonight I will focus on education and health and suggest why we need to adapt to address our skills shortage and improve the physical and mental well-being of all our young people as a priority. It is not acceptable that the island I love and represent is divided between the have and have-nots. We need to change this, and the most powerful tool for doing so is through education. We need to do this because not only are we morally obliged to, but because we have to address the current and future skills shortage, as it is causing inward migration at such high levels year on year. In order to address immigration, we need to address education. From the 4-year-old starting at St Lawrence Primary School to the 18-year-old leaving Holier, we need to ensure that our education system caters for every child. We have to aim higher than simply matching the academic results of UK schools. We need a bespoke education system that meets the demands of our diversifying and growing economy. Without this, we are going to increase our reliance on immigration and further the levels of inequality in Jersey. We need to invest further into a sufficiently targeted and flexible Jersey premium to ensure those from the poorest backgrounds in our society are given equal opportunity to succeed in life. The premium available to head teachers with sufficient autonomy will improve the standards and services within our schools. They are best placed to improve the academic and physical lives of our children. Improving the physical and mental well-being of our children can be achieved by enhancing the physical literacy program within schools, by following initiatives such as the Daily Mile, that's already been mentioned tonight. I believe this is important because exercise has been proven to stimulate better concentration and improve learning, as well as the obvious health benefits. We can also increase opportunities outside the classroom. The work of caring cooks is one example of a culture change that will lead to a healthier island. This change needs to happen now to ensure that cases of chronic illness, such as diabetes, are restricted. This is important as it will make our health service more sustainable as our population ages. Ladies and gentlemen, it's only if we work together that we can have an active future, reduce inequality and address our skills shortages without resorting to unsustainable immigration. We must invest now in promoting better health throughout our community to reduce further reliance on hospital services. Please consider me for one of your votes on the 16th of May. Thank you.
Thank you, Connétable. Now call Mr. Gordon Troy.
Good evening, Centre of the World, St Lawrence. I'm Gordon George Troy, educated at De La Salle College. I'm from a business and politically motivated family that are passionate about the island we love. I would appreciate your vote so I may have the honour and privilege of serving the people of Jersey. If elected to the Chamber, I would hope to bring propositions to 1, introduce a livable pension for senior citizens. 2, make housing available and truly affordable. Introduce population control and work permits, and peg GST at 5% and remove it from food items. I'd like to see a fintech university for education and the finance industry, and I would really wish to crush government financial waste. Jersey has failed our pensioners, bringing hardship to many. I want pensions increased to what I call the livable pension, so that they can have and enjoy retired life. Young families need affordable homes. To build these, government must do the following. 1. Government must allocate land for the appropriate large and small house and apartment sites required. No sites, no housing. 2. Government must provide a low initial deposit scheme for first-time buyers. 3. Government must provide a mortgage payment scheme to fit the buyer's incomes and all tax breaks. 4. Government must offer shared equity schemes. 5. Government must remove user-pays planning charges from planning applications. If user pay stays, it must be on planning applications that are approved only. The planning department gets money every time it says no to your new homes. There is 1 million no opportunities in every planning application. For the next 30 years, we have a difficult population demographic, as many of our working population will retire. So we must manage our population with a balanced approach to control and immigration. Working permits, short and long term, are essential so that we can service our economy and provide staff for our industries. If we fail to give the economy enough employees, the economy will stall, making it difficult for government to afford public services. I want accountability for states' project spending. Projects must be 1. Necessary, 2. Value for money, 3. On time and on budget. £65 million airport improvements, unbelievable and unnecessary. Build hotel beds first, then airports. Previous states members should pledge that they will stop unnecessary state spending. This is Jersey, not cloud cuckoo land. Financial technology is our biggest opportunity coming up now. Banking systems and transaction payments are to be revolutionised worldwide through fintech. I propose establishing a fintech university, and I'm a doer. Government should be doers. Please vote for Troy for Senator. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Troy. I now call Deputy Tracey Valois.
Good evening, Madam Connétable, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Tracey Valois. I have served as a States Member for 9.5 years as Deputy of St Saviour and Deputy of St John's. My roles have included Assistant Minister at both Education and Treasury, Chair of the Public Accounts Committee, President of the Scrutiny Chairman's Committee, and serving as a Member or Vice Chair on a variety of topics right across scrutiny. I have proven that I am able and willing to work with all members on all areas that have challenged and continue to challenge our island in a responsible and effective manner. Examples of this can be seen from the introduction of a completely independent framework for our equivalent of the National Audit Office in 2014. The perseverance and hard work, both in Treasury and on scrutiny, to introduce an improved funding mechanism for higher education and the overturning of the nursery education funding position. This evening, I would like to address one of the main reasons as to why I chose to put myself forward as a candidate for Senator. At the very heart of my future vision for Jersey is addressing education, skills, and lifelong learning. We are to tackle the very difficulties that face us of Brexit, automation, artificial intelligence, working demographics, nutrition, health, and immigration. Then we need to do things differently, and we need to start now. The Mental Health Quality Report 2016 to 2017 revealed that in Jersey, 1 in 10 children have a mental health problem. 50% of mental health issues are established by the age of 14. Self-esteem amongst teenagers has fallen by 20%. 75% of mental health issues start before the age of 18. We model our education system on the UK, and yet we know from the Programme for International Student Assessment that UK children are amongst the most unhappiest in the world, ranking 38 out of 48 in 2017. I do not claim to be an educationalist or an expert academic, but I am a mother, an auntie, a friend, and a great listener who has an ability to get to the bottom of a problem and provide solutions. There are jurisdictions the world over recognising these issues and addressing them. It doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen, and it can in Jersey, in partnership with you. My tenacity, love of Jersey, our future, and the well-being of our environment, community and economy is why I would ask you to consider me for one of your votes on the 16th of May. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Valois. Now I call upon Mr. Phil McGuire.
Good evening, St. Lawrence. I'd like to talk about a problem we have in this island. As everyone knows, we do have a massive drug and substance addiction problem here, but the worst type of addiction has never been addressed. True, there's only a small number of people who suffer from it, but their social effects are devastating our lives. I am, of course, talking about tax addiction, and this is something suffered by a group called politicians. Politicians never seem to have enough of taxes. They always need their fix. That's why we've had GST twice, LTC twice, VED, increased import duties, more stealth taxes than I can shake a stick at. So what are the, as with every other type of addiction, this one has social consequences. What are they? Well, the first one is an addiction to massive building construction projects. Because the more they can make of those, the more they have an excuse to charge more taxes. After all, does anyone really believe that if our hospital is going to cost 800 million, that we won't be able to pay back without having to raise taxes? The other problem is, of course, the obsession with increased immigration, because getting people to pay more taxes is only the soft drugs. Getting more people to pay more taxes, that's the really hardcore drugs, and that's the one where they really get high. That's, of course, why we had GST in the first place, because that meant everyone paid taxes. That's why there are no exceptions to that included in it, and why it's probably going to go up again, probably multiple times if we allow it. Then there's the other problem, is increased civil service, because the bigger the civil service is, the more it costs, therefore the more we've got to raise taxes. Terribly sorry about this. Now, is there anything that can be done? Well, I don't know if there's a cure or not, but I do know one thing. We do need to keep people who suffer from this terrible addiction as far away from government as possible so that they can cause least damage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire. So we've heard from 17 candidates. As I said earlier, 16 are going to have the opportunity to answer your questions here this evening. There are some roving microphones for when they're needed. May I have the first questioner, please? Don't be shy. I see Nick, Peter, thank you. If you can state your name, please. Can I just check, please, before Mr. Palmer asks, are we going to have another question? Yes, okay, thank you. So we'll go from Mr. Palmer, one question, to the gentleman on this side. Can you stand, please, so everyone can hear you?
My name's Nick. Is this working? My name's Nick Palmer. All of the candidates, more or less, have promised to look after the countryside, the economy, the hospital, education, young people, old age pensioners, Middle Jersey, affordable housing, diversification of business, the environment, population, and they're all going to listen to the people. Right, this is a question about the honesty and realism of political promises. You've all promised to follow most of the causes I've listed, no surprises. Now, as the first thing politicians learn when they're trying to fulfill their promises is that there's not enough money or resources to do everything. What I think we all want to know is which conflicting aspects of Jersey or which segments of society will you throw under the bus when you find you can't do everything?
Thank you, Nick. Peter, there was a gentleman on this side.
My name is David Moon, and I'm a parishioner. I'd like to ask, there's been much public disquiet at the provision of a new hospital, which has taken endless years and endless amount of money with no result so far. Now, the Future Hospital Review Panel in January of this year made a recommendation in the following terms. The panel believed that states members should be given the opportunity to debate and approve the revised scheme, given that the footprint of the building has changed significantly since 2016, and that the project will now be delivered in a phased approach. The Council of Ministers should lodge a proposition in order to seek states' approval of the revised scheme. My question is, do the candidates support the recommendation of that panel?
Thank you. So we have two questions there, one from Mr. Palmer, one from Mr. Moon. The short straw this evening has fallen to Deputy Moore on my right. She is going to answer the question, both questions first of all, and then we're going to move to my left so that everybody has 2 minutes to answer those questions. Deputy Moore.
Thank you for those two questions. So firstly, I think I tried to explain in my speech that I feel very strongly we need to concentrate on 3 different things, and when making decisions, consider all of those things in relation to those decisions. So those aspects are the community, the environment, and the economy. I feel they're all important and interrelated. You ask what we would drop if we had to make difficult decisions. Of course, all of the decisions we make are difficult, but we do prioritise, and I think by prioritising around those 3 things, and tonight I talked about children and the importance of children and the next generation and our future, the future of the island, its environment, and the sustainability of that. I think that that is an important aspect, and equally is the issue of our elders and how we look after those and ensure that their grandchildren have a bright future as well. Many people here tonight will tell you that things are all going wrong, but actually I think there's an awful lot to be proud of. Our long-term care scheme, for example, is something that is almost a world first. There are very few nations that have been able to deal with the issue successfully, and we're doing so, and we'll continue to. Moving on, the hospital, we've recently debated the issue once again, and I sincerely believe that we do need to move on and build the hospital, because we need to provide a sustainable provision for the community. We've seen the police station and a great delay with that, and the only people who actually lose out are the public and those people who need to use the facilities when we spend a long time debating, so we need to build.
I'm not sure what's happened at other hustings, if there's been applause after the questions have been answered. I think actually that really is down to you as the audience. Okay, we're moving on to Deputy Bree.
Thank you very much. Honesty and realism of political promises. If you read my manifesto, you'll see that I actually make no promises and make no commitments whatsoever, because you can't as an independent individual. All you can do is put down what are your core values and your real beliefs about how this island should be run. Most politicians will promise you the earth and deliver very little. We have to look at ways in which we can save money through the public sector reform. We are paying so much money for a huge public sector, and yet services are not being delivered properly. With regards to the Future Hospital, as chairman of the Future Hospital Review Panel that actually issued that report, I think it is utterly ridiculous that the Council of Ministers is refusing to allow the new States Assembly to actually debate and approve the revised plans. The revised plans differ completely to the original plans that the States Assembly were asked to approve. And yet, now, the plans have changed completely, and yet the current Council of Ministers is saying, no, we don't need another debate, we don't need another vote. Well, that's wrong, because a huge number of new members of the States Assembly will be sitting in the next Assembly. They should have the opportunity because you have put them there, you have elected them, you want your voice to be heard through your elected representatives. But this Council of Ministers is refusing to allow that to happen. If I am elected, I will bring a proposition to make sure it does. Thank you.
Deputy Mezek.
Starting on the second question first, I'll be 100% honest and say I am against reopening the debate on the site. I do think that the boat has moved on from there, and I think that these ideas about how St Saviour is still viable, I think that argument has been lost. But when it comes to the proposals for the current site, yes, they absolutely must come back to the States Assembly. And I think that it is right that there is a full debate and vote on this. And what I want to see in the process leading up to that is actual consultation with the people who will be working in this building, the professionals who will be delivering that care and that service, who up until now have not been consulted with. That is completely wrong. They know what's happening on the ground, and I want to hear their views, and thus far we haven't been able to do that. So I want that to be what happens in the run-up to that next debate, but that next debate must happen in the new Assembly. Mr Palmer, the campaign that I'm running is completely different to any campaign that has ever been run in Jersey politics, because I'm not standing as an independent, I'm standing with 18 other candidates, and we're not standing with just one election leaflet, we're standing with a 33-page manifesto. Now, many of you might choose to read this manifesto and see things in it which you don't like or don't agree with, and that's fine because this is a democracy. But what we've tried to do is be crystal clear with you where we stand on these issues, which leaves nowhere for us to hide after the election. Our promises are clear. The main part of our manifesto are our 10 key pledges. Every single one of these pledges will correspond to a proposition in the States Assembly from our members, and obviously the chances of it succeeding depend on how many members we get elected. I think that some of the pledges actually don't go as far as I would like them to go, because we've tried to be realistic with them. I don't want to promise things that we can't deliver, because that does nothing but disillusion people with politics. There are politicians who will stand up and say, oh, we're not going to raise taxes, and then look at the voting record of the current Assembly. It's been there all the time. I think Jersey deserves better than that.
Mr Broder.
Thank you, Madam Constable. Following on the same line as the previous speaker, taking the second question first, new hospital, do I support the recommendations? Yes, I do. But there's a problem. And by the way, I also agree that changing the site now would be counterproductive, would cost even more and cause further delay. And the problem with the hospital follows on to the question one of Mr Palmer. And by the way, like Deputy Bree, I didn't put down a long list of things that I would promise, because as my manifesto says, until you change the system, all those pledges they simply go in the bin because they cannot be delivered. You asked not enough money for sources and which would go under the bus. Well, I would want to sort out the public service. As I said in my opening speech, an example, 7 years and millions of pounds wasted trying to resolve and bring about a better system. Thank heavens the new State's Chief Executive is actually on the case now. Why is this important? Because a lot of money is wasted there. Why are all our projects costing three times as much as they should do? It's because we're asking civil servants to do jobs that they're actually not qualified to do. We pick up the phone and say, Mr. Executive, would you go and buy some new chairs or something? And he picks up, oh yes, how much? Oh, that's very cheap, we'll have those. 4 times the price that anybody else would pay. We need some wheeler dealers to buy for us, not people who are not qualified to do the work. And let's pay civil servants what they're worth. There are some very good ones. I don't know how the state will ever manage without them. The others, frankly, should bring money with them on Fridays. We need to sort all that out.
Senator Farnham.
I had always envisaged the new hospital being located out of town, but after having carefully examined the options, I think for logistical and practical reasons it should be located within in the ring road. I think the important thing is that to remember we're going to spend somewhere between 10 and 15 billion pounds in running the health service over the next 30 years. That's about 3% of the capital cost. And the sooner we can get on with that debate, the better. We need to make sure with that money we're employing and paying properly the best possible staff, engaging with the best technologies and bringing the best possible equipment. But I think if Deputy Bree is elected, he's going to bring a proposition. I think it probably does need, the new plans do need to go back, and I look forward to that debate. I too think that we should not even consider discussing any new taxes or charges without first ensuring we are delivering the best possible value from the public sector. So I think there's potential to drive some savings there without compromising our service. I think that's it. Is that it? Thank you. Thanks very much.
Deputy Fondre.
Start with Mr. Moon first. I have to consider that the hospital's been the biggest PR disaster of this entire Council of Ministers, I'm afraid. I'm actually on the review panel with Deputy Bree, so therefore, of course, I'll support the recommendations. We did, however, have the vote, but the site as approved by the Assembly has changed, as has the design. So it's a matter really for the future Assembly if they do feel they need to reassess it or not. Personally, I was all for a like-for-like cost comparison between the main site options, and that could have been done at a high level by the time of the planning inquiry, which starts in September, by the time it reported back. I'm somewhat concerned that on the present application, and the jury's out on this, we need a bit of advice on this. As I understand it, it's just about access to the site for demolition. Everything else is what they call a reserved matter. There's no actual certainty yet as to what actually the application is going to look like. And in my view, it's been political dogma within the certain ministerial side that's blighted this project and has cost us millions. The concerns expressed about the cost, the impact on patients and staff, and the level of debt, I think we all know. And as a Jerseyman, I really don't like seeing money wasted. Mr. Palmer, my three priorities are on the front of my leaflet. They're all about public sector reform, sustainable finances, and preparing for Brexit. Now, I genuinely believe that there are significant savings in the public sector reform programme that can come out. The Office strategy, which will be very dear to Deputy Noel, there is his heart, and mine, is meant to save about £10 million a year. And so if you can get those savings, we've then got some wriggle room later on. But things like population control will have a direct impact on house prices. Things like reviewing what's the impact on the market by external buy-to-let doesn't cost very much, it's happening already, but it's part of business as usual. So I think there is ability to manage other priorities within those decisions. Thank you.
Steve Pallet.
Nick and David are both excellent questions. I think, Nick, you'd be pretty disappointed if I was going to throw the environment under the bus. But I think if we're going to provide affordable housing, we've all, I think, along all the candidates have said over the last few days that it is a priority. Not all that can be delivered in St Helier. If we're going to build in St Helier, I think we need to make sure that we've got good open space for people and it's attractive for people to live. So I'm afraid not throw it under the bus, but maybe we do really need to look at providing sites, I think, around the island, around current country developments, like the development they were looking to do in St Peters. So that may mean the loss of some small areas of greenfield site in and around village developments. Unfortunately, I think that's something I think that we're going to have to commit to. In terms of the health budget, again, I don't want to throw it under the bus, but I think there does need to be some prioritisation, more on health promotion and investing in programmes to encourage people to lead healthier lifestyles. I've already mentioned that in my speech tonight, and I think it's something that we really need to concentrate on and commit some budget to, because at the moment, in terms of health prevention, we commit very little. In terms of the hospital, I listened very intently to the last debate we had on whether we were Constable Taylor's review and whether we were going to review sites. And I was quite undecided. I'd said that to people before that debate. But the speech that really made my mind up was a speech that was made by Deputy Richard Renner from St Wands, who at the end of his speech said we'd already agreed a site We'd already agreed the funding, and it was time to move on. Now, he's been heavily involved in the scrutiny side of it, and it was the one speech that really changed my mind. So for me now, I think we need to move on. I don't want to see any of the £26 million wasted. I think we really need to commit and build a hospital for you to make sure you've got facilities that we all deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Troy.
Yes, what would I throw under the bus, as you so nicely put it? Probably the thing I spoke about earlier, which is the proposal to spend money on the airport. Some £65 million has been quoted in the press. And I think what we should do is work on building the tourism industry. Years ago, we had a much more vibrant tourism industry with a much smaller airport. So I think what we're planning to do with the airport is just a waste of time, because what you need to do is you need to produce more beds so more people can come, and then you work on building a bigger airport. To move on to the other question, the hospital, yes. We definitely need one with our ageing population demographic. It is urgent. I'm not in favour of keeping the Grade A or Grade 1 listed frontage. I don't think single glazed sash windows would ever contain an airborne virus. Retaining the front would impede planning opportunities, and we need a modern high-tech hospital, not a relic to adore. So, thanks.
Deputy Valois.
Thank you for your questions. Firstly, I'll address Nick. Yes, it's not easy to get things done in the States Assembly. It requires a lot of perseverance, integrity, resilience and rigorous challenge, and that's not just in scrutiny, but it's on ministerial side as well. In all honesty, I would suggest reading my manifesto. There's certain areas, it's not throwing things under the bus, but I've got core areas that I would like to focus on. And I talk about the social security contributions, looking at primary care and small businesses. I also talk about the tax system and how we need to put it into a more simplified system, one personal tax system rather than two separates. And I will work extremely hard to do that, and I've proven that I can work with other members to prize these things through, but also the vital part is the accountability mechanism right at the beginning in trying to get what I want to achieve in the next term into the plans in order to deliver it within the departments over the next 4 years should I get in. On terms of the hospital, it's really an issue of the sovereignty of Parliament. And as I understand the proposition that came to us about the site, it's a very different area. And I think we've heard many candidates here today talk about working together and scrutiny and the Council of Ministers working more closer together. And I think it's, although I fear the delay, I think it's important that we take the recommendation from scrutiny and ensure that the Parliament have the right debate and ensure we're asking and challenging on the questions that a lot of people are extremely concerned about.
Or Mr. McGuire.
I beg to differ with Mr. Palmer. I think that we have plenty enough money to do all the things that we say if we did it properly. We raise £750 million a year. Surely that's enough to be able to make some inroads into all of those things. But the problem is that we have this thing called a civil service that we pour the money into and then it vanishes. And very little comes out, and we're like, well, what's going on? And in fact, it's getting worse. Every year, we seem to pay more and more and get less and less. So if I would throw anything under the bus, it would be the unmanageable civil service. As far as the hospital is concerned, I am against doing anything further until we know what we're buying. I mean, we're being asked to buy a car, and we don't even know how many wheels it has. I mean, people talk about primary care, but The problem is that primary care for an average population and primary care for an aging population, which everyone says we have, are entirely different. Because, as the NHS will tell you, at the end of life, prices skyrocket. So if we're only designing a hospital that works for an average 100,000 population, we're going to be in for a real disappointment. Until we know what we're getting, we shouldn't move further. The idea that we spent 23 million, so therefore we should go on to spend another 800 million so we won't waste the 23 million, is just disingenuous. Let's just stop and say, what are we getting? Let's get a little bit more transparency on this issue.
Senator Ferguson.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Moon. Advocate Moon, isn't it? The hospital, I was on the same panel, and I have been discussing it with Deputy Fondre, so I'm not going to repeat what he said because I agree with him. The other thing is that I understand the St Saviour site will yield far fewer houses than the hospital site. And as far as the hospital goes, the first thing we need to address is the human resources there and the staffing. Nick, actually, I would have said, which areas will you do last? Not who I'm going to throw under the bus. I think we've got to get the immigration policy going quickly, and we need to see how Guernsey have applied their work permits, because their population has been reasonably static over the last 5 years. We need to review the expenditure, the capital expenditure, 42 million for Kennervay, 42 for the airport, 466 for the hospital, and it goes on. Overall tax review, I think, is one of the first things we should be doing. The FPP has recommended prudence over the next few years because of uncertainty, and we don't really know how things affect our tax take. I brought an amendment to the medium-term plan to get this information. It was defeated, but within a month, the comptroller started the work to find out the sort of things I was wanting to know with the whole tax situation. You know, and as far as expenditure, I understand that cement in the UK is half the price that we pay for it in Jersey, and the forecast budget surplus in 2019 is 332,000, which is less than the average price of a three-bedroomed house. So, you know, we're running very tight at the moment.
Thank you, Senator.
Oh, sorry. The bell wasn't very loud.
We need a bit more wally on that bell, I think. I call Mr. Luce.
Start with Mr. Palmer. Mr. Palmer, I don't think anything has to be thrown under the bus. It's a matter of balance and a matter of seeing what and how at the time. If we had a bit more accountability, maybe we would have a little bit more money, and maybe that would go around and we could have a little dabble at everything and leave nothing to go under the bus. As far as Advocate Moon is concerned, I'm a great admirer, sir, of your letters in the JEP, letters to the editor. I believe that there's more wisdom, more sense written in the letters to the editor that comes out of the States Assembly. I really do. The thought of building a hospital in Gloucester Street with patients in the hospital and the staff working there is just completely, absolutely stupid. You need a virgin, flat-level site where you can start anew, build a proper hospital, and make everybody, this nursing staff, the doctors, everybody happy. You've got one here in St Lawrence. It's down on the seafront. It would make a perfect new hospital. And for a start, it would half the cost. It's ludicrous. I mean, we're an island now, 100,000 people, and we're talking about spending billions on a hospital. Absolutely crazy. And Mr. Besaw, Graham Besaw from Groove Hill, wrote a lovely letter to the editor. He said that why hadn't the states of Jersey bought St John's Manor? We would have money in our pockets. We could have bought St John's Manor. We could have made that into the most wonderful, wonderful country hospital. The answer is we do not build a hospital in Gloucester Street. I'm behind Deputy Bree. If I get into the States, the last place that bloody hospital will be in Gloucester Street.
Well, the audience appreciated your reply, Mr. Luce, but I think I would urge candidates to not use profanities. If they can avoid it, please. I call Mr. Ocean.
Right, I'll start with Advocate Moon. First of all, it is, as Frank just said, about putting the hospital in Gloucester Street. Now, nobody's taken into consideration that people are living Kensington Place. There's businesses there. Restaurants, everything else, but the people that live in Kensington Place, and I've got news that nobody else on this table knows about. If the hospital remains in St Helier and is built as a building site, and it will turn into a building site, the consultants will quit, all of them. And if they quit, who's going to run the hospital? There won't be anybody there, and nobody will be able to recruit those people to do it. You've got a hygiene situation. There's going to be noise for the patients. I suggest that the hospital goes at St Saviour's Hospital. Okay, knock the whole thing down. The lawn is second graded as well. So if people disagree with me, they can be buried under the lawn before we pull it up. Basically, that's where it's got to go. I mean, there is no height restriction or anything else, and it's not going to cause the chaos that it's going to cause in Gloucester Street and Kensington Place. And take it from me, there's going to be chaos. On the point of Mr. Palmer, I put down 6 objectives. The first 4 are they would actually require States Assembly approval. The last 2 I'm actually in the process of working on. Thank you very much.
Ms. Scott.
David, the hospital. I can't tell you how uncomfortable I am with that decision, which the project's not been based on a clear vision of future health and care management, was spectacularly mismanaged and involves a level of finance that could bankrupt Jersey if mishandled. And I'm not even sure about the alternative means of financing that might have been explored. So I happen to rely on evidence, as you might expect from my background. So I'm going to need more information to comment fairly on this and intend to pursue the facts if elected. Mr. Palmer, what would I throw under the bus? Well, actually, my manifesto's got quite a few things I'd like to throw under the bus. Projects best left to private investors, private developers and the business community. Excessive consultant fees for conducting inquiries that fail to take into account local knowledge or reports that only get shelved. Government services best run by the voluntary sector. Additional government bureaucracy created by stealth taxes and an overcomplicated tax and social security system. Crown goes masquerading as solutions to government when what is needed is real leadership. Inefficient policies, and too many states members who are not acting value to the process of government. Some luck, we might save enough money to do the other things. Thank you.
Senator Gorst.
Thank you, Nick. We live in an incredibly fast-moving world. The States of Jersey is a business that spends around £1 billion every year. We're running a country of 100,000 people, and we face challenges like never before. I can't see anything any of the issues that we face that can be thrown under the bus. 2 of the things I'm talking about during this election are reform, but they're also productivity. They're absolutely connected. So we've changed the accountability structure in the civil service. We're changing the ministerial structure. We need to work more cooperatively right across government. If we don't get to grips with the reform of the civil service, and there are thousands of people doing a great job, but they're stopped from being creative, they're stopped from serving islanders within the structure that they work. If we don't get to grips with that, we won't be able to drive the efficiencies, which will give us flexibility flexible money to do some of the other things that we know that we need to do. Otherwise, people will, during the next stage, be coming to look for more money. Productivity, we haven't spoken much about productivity in this election yet, but it's absolutely critical, and it's going to be about investment in technology. That's not just government, that's got to be businesses as well, and it's about education. It's about a digital skills academy. It's about a university for Jersey. If we don't get to grips with productivity in our community, populations levels will continue to rise, and that's not sustainable in the long term either. It's all connected. If we want a more environmentally friendly island, productivity is also key to that, about keeping Jersey special and keeping Jersey green. So those are absolutely connected. I don't think there's any of the challenges that we face that can be thrown under the bus. The hospital, I've probably not got much to add to what others have said. The site has been decided. The actual cost is about 275 million. Then you've got contingencies that takes it up to 400 million. I expect, however, any incoming health minister to want to seek endorsement of the scheme once the planning permission is received.
Finally, Mr. Rizzoli.
I'll deal with the hospital first. In my previous life, I was the industrial commercial electrician. So I worked on heavy industry, petrochemical, hospitals. And I can't tell you, the last thing I would want to do is to rebuild a hospital on the same site. I always thought it should have been a greenfield site, space enough to provide all the services and parking. So that's where I am with that. But that is, we are where we are. I think you've all been under the roller, all of you, for a very long time. But for 15 years, you've had the opportunity to change how this government is working. You really have not taken the opportunity. Politics is the art of making the if you like, the unacceptable acceptable. That's why we're in a mess, because the people that represent you they have to be loyal a particular way. Now, they themselves, people like Mr. Gorst, I'm afraid, are not able to change the system. They're too far up the ladder, and their heads would come off if they tried. So, we have to help out. The only thing that will change the system is financial accountability. Now, when I said to you that the accounts are not fit for purpose, I really do mean they're not fit for purpose. And if you don't understand, they've got hundreds of millions of pounds of your money, and you can ask them for the receipt, and you can't, and you don't, I'm sorry, listen, the problem lies with you. Yes, this world is going very quickly, and we can't have defensive-type strategies. The truth is the only thing that will save this island. The only thing. Facts, not opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions for the candidates, please? Who's got the microphone? Oh, okay. It's Oliver. I'm pleased to see that we're having a question from one of our younger parishioners here this evening. Is there another question to follow, please? Because we are taking two at a time. Okay, thank you. So we'll start with Oliver.
My name is Oliver Wilderspin. Unfortunately, very few young people seem to be interested in local politics, and that's a shame. So my question is, what would you do as a senator or a minister to get more young people across the political spectrum interested in local politics?
Good question, thank you, Oliver. And I saw Monica Eisen.
Monica Eisen. It's a question for Sam Medic. On his posters, I see that he says full funding for uni fees.
Sorry, the question must be one that is addressed to all candidates.
Okay. Full funding for uni fees. How would you propose to find the money for that funding?
Thank you. So we have two questions. One on how candidates would address young people and encourage them to become interested in politics. And the second question was on university funding. We're going to start with the person who drew number 16, and that is Deputy Valois.
Thanks for that. I wasn't expecting that. So, okay, Oliver, young people involved in politics. We've got lots of different programs that go on in the States at the moment. So we have Year 5 that attend the States Assembly, and we have certain youth parliaments that are ongoing. But I know for a fact that the youth service are actually trying to get a youth council together. And so we need to actually invest in support with the youth service and encourage them to get more people and actually assist teachers in understanding local politics as well. Because I find if you meet a teacher that actually understands local politics, they tend to actually pass that on to the students as well. So I'd encourage the teachers to understand more about the local aspect of politics as well. Full funding for university fees is actually in my proposition. I've actually suggested that we actually have to, in order to make it sustainable, what's just been agreed by the States Assembly, I have to confess I sat on the scrutiny panel that looked at this, and it's not sustainable in the long term. So I would suggest actually we need to re-examine the amount for funding under 50,000, so it's actually people are able to send their children to university under £50,000. And I would actually introduce a loan scheme for living expenses, and the reason, and the states pay for the tuition fees. And the reason why I say that is because I think the student should be treated as an individual, not on their parents' income. Okay.
Mr. McGuire.
To get the youth involved in something they don't want to be involved in. Well, good luck with that. I've been trying for years as a stepfather, and I've never found a way. The reason why, from what the little when the youth have talked to me, because I'm so old, is that they feel disempowered. And I think it's about time we started informing them that they are truly a wonderful asset, and that we should actually be encouraging them to understand just how they are able to not only change Jersey, but change the world. These are, you know, if you only look at our own generation and the number of people who've gone out and changed things, and the youth are able to do the same, but we're not telling them that, or they're not hearing it. As far as full funding for universities is concerned, I think we have the problem the wrong way round. We're looking at how we can get the money out of the students, whereas we should be saying, what value can we get out of our large amounts of money that we spend in terms of university grants? Surely we should be able to go along to people and say, well, Mr. University, we're sending 5 people to you. Do we get a discount? So that it makes it more reasonable and more valuable to get so we don't have to increase the university fees, we simply get better value for them. And that's all I have to say on that one. Thank you.
Senator Ferguson.
Right. As far as Oliver's question, getting children interested in local politics, they need to have a better training system within the schools. The teachers should. The trouble is, if we've got too many, I'm sorry if I'm going to insult anybody, if we have too many English teachers, they don't quite get to grips with the Jersey system, and then the children don't learn in civics, or whatever they call the course nowadays, about our system. The work the GREF is doing over states assemblies and youth parliaments and so on is fantastic. The shadowing program that the IOD organises is awfully good too. And for me, my son really wasn't terribly interested in politics at all until I stood for deputy in 2002, and then he got very keen. He's somewhere up a lamppost at the moment, putting some posters up. Full funding for university. I want a sustainable system. I think we need to do it the way some of the United States do, where as parents start a fund when the child is born, and when it's 18, if it doesn't want to go to uni, they can have a big spend. Obviously, if it's a low-income parent, then there's got to be state support. But basically, we've got a big finance industry here, a lot of experience in funds. We should be able to set this up ourselves. And also, we need to train careers advisors to know which universities give proper value for money, because they don't know. And the UK Auditor General is very critical of the university industry in the UK. Sorry. Why wasn't I getting...
Mr. Luce?
Didn't get the two.
Right. Oliver, you must be one of very, very few teenagers who's interested in politics. Most teenagers are with their iPad or they're doing something different. I think it comes down to really education. And education from both the schools and from government. Probably government is not too interested in teenagers because they can't vote, which is a little bit cynical. But really, it's down to education, and it's down to schools to lay out the groundwork of what our political system is, and it is for the states to actually provide that information to schools. It comes down to education, basically. When it comes to universities and funding and the like, it's rather odd that we have our children go to school, and we all are very keen on where they go to school, and if we can afford to pay for them to go to school, we pay for them to go to school, and we are concerned about their education. There isn't a mother and father in the island that isn't concerned about their children's education. And of course, we are very, very happy when they progress and they show talent. And the whole system, the whole ethos of being educated is that you be better educated and you end up in a position where you are sufficiently intelligent to go to university. Now, if you get to that stage where you can go to university, and that's what all mothers and fathers are working for, that their child can go, have a better education, have a better life than them, then they get to the point when they want to go to a university, and we have the stumbling block. Basically, the government should ensure that all children have the ability to go to a university. Thank you.
Mr. Ocean.
Oliver, great question. Now, to young people, politics is an enigma. Am I right? Well, how do we combat that? I would suggest what we do is we have web conferencing between 2 or 3 schools at a time with the states. So there could be a Q&A and we get a connection between the two of us. And I think that this could work. I mean, going and visiting one school at a time is cost effective, but doing what I've suggested would actually give you a good idea on how government works. Okay, does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. Right, on the part of full funding for universities. First of all, we'll be talking about a loan scheme and maybe a bursary. I actually would like to see a university here. And Highlands, if it was changed and upgraded, could actually be the university on this island. I mean, lots of people would like to stay on the island instead of going off island. So it's something that could be looked at in the future, and I think that it would work. Thank you very much.
Ms. Scott.
Oliver, I think that's a very good question. I think actually it's surprising how many people don't realise that you can vote at 16. So actually having some sort of political education in advance is useful. And there is already a citizenship course in schools. And unlike some of the candidates are saying, I think we need more independent schools, I'd actually like to see more consistency, because I believe some schools will teach that better than others. I would like, and that applies to other areas of education as well. The university funding, yeah, I understood the kind of concept of why the current council minister said, yes, let's give out all this money for university funding, because of something that's said in the immigration policy about you get more productivity if you've got more university-educated people. But I was troubled by this because I was thinking, well, actually, when you do see some of these university degrees, what are they going to do for the island? And I do feel that we need to be thinking much more long-term in terms of how children of the future will be surfing the island and encouraging them to come back to the island with the resources, with the training that we would like them to contribute. I mean, we're not even good at keeping jobs for them at the moment. So, answer to that, I would like to see much more of a long-term plan in terms of like the financing of university grants, not for everybody. Let's look at what our needs are. And as well as the means funding, let's look more at what will the jobs of the future be, how are we going to fit them. Thank you.
Senator Gorst.
Thank you for your question, Oliver. It might surprise parishioners of St Lawrence to know that there are some things about elections that I quite enjoy. And one of those is that invariably I can get home early evening prior to then going out to a Hustings and having something to eat. And I did that this evening. And my 8-year-old daughter said to me, "Daddy, good news." And she listed 3 people that she said were going to vote for me. I explored this a little bit further. And it transpired, sadly, that they were 3 people in her class at school. And I had to explain to her, "Darling, you do know that they can't, they're only 8, they can't vote." She said, "Of course, well, they know that, Daddy, but they would if they could." But it's a serious point. I actually think young people are much more interested in politics than we let them on for. They've got particular issues that they want to see government involved in and they want to see government changing. I think that the youth panel is doing a really great job. They helped me with the recruitment of the new Children's Commissioner, and they're going to be doing more of that. The school councils that I've met are incredibly switched on political children and doing great things to make improvements in their schools. And I think ultimately we're going to need to have a standing proper youth parliament. But things that you've done, Oliver, like work shadowing, states members and right across the state should do much, much more of that as well. When it comes to university funding, I happen to think that the new scheme is a good scheme. There is some certainty. The state's committed to doing a review. I think they should do. But that's not the be-all and end-all. We also need, as I've said, the Digital Skills Academy. We need to make sure that people have access to good degrees on island as well, and also good vocational training, because education is good for children. Education to degree level is good for children, whether they go and come back or not, and that's what we should be thinking about.
Mr. Rizzoli is extremely keen, I'm pleased to see. I call upon him now.
Oh, yeah, okay. Young children and whether they should be interested or, well, of course, if they are interested in politics, but it would be nothing that I would push down their throat. They should, of course, learn at school what the structure of government is and the basics. But if I had teenagers interested in politics, I'd say I think there's something, well, not wrong, but some people, I'll tell you what they're interested in, before I put my foot in it. I'll tell you what they're interested in. They're saying, why is there wars in Syria? You know, why is that man and woman starving to death in the desert when there's a camera there? That's what these are the sort of questions they ask. Why is this wrong? Why is that wrong? That's why they're interested. Anyway, that's the sort of interest that I get from them. The other thing is education. Right. Now this comes to, I'd like you to take a look at the fare policy on this. You know, I think you've got to be up to £105,000 to get, or under £105,000 to get support. what is curious, though, is that the social security payments, you know, the the social security payments are capped at around £72,000, and yet people who earn beyond that figure, they want help. You see the disparity. You can't throw out policies like this, and people will, of course, want to support education, but you must support the young to educate themselves in the subject that they enjoy. Never mind what the island wants. Education is pursuing what you enjoy.
Thank you, Mr.
Not feeding some trough.
Thank you, Mr. Rizzoli. Your time is up. Call Deputy Moore.
Thank you for the question. Oliver, I first stood for election when I was 17 years old as the president of my student union. And so that educational establishment that I was in was a thriving place where young people were actually quite involved in politics and having an opportunity to choose the person who was going to lead mostly their events, but actually lead the community. And so it was a very enjoyable experience for me, and it invigorated, I think, the community that I was in. And so I would absolutely commend more councils and engagement like that is relevant, because I think it's when politics becomes relevant and when young people have an opportunity to have a voice and also people listen to them, then there is an engagement, and that's really the key. This is all about engagement. You're here this evening, each and every one of you, because you want to be engaged in your island life and you have questions and you take importantly your decision at the ballot box, which is absolutely right, and as do many others. Now, the other wonderful thing about elections is canvassing, and at the moment there are a lot of young people at home, because when we knock on doors they're often at home studying for their exams that are coming up, and I had a great opportunity to chat with one young man this morning who was studying for his A-levels, and we had a great discussion about Highlands College, the facilities that are available there, whether we need to invest more in IT and skills. And so there was a young person who had great views and vision, and I thoroughly enjoyed and also learnt a lot from talking to him. So to talk briefly about a university, because we're going to run out of time, maybe I will have another day.
Thank you, Deputy Bree now.
Thank you very much indeed. How do we get young people interested in politics? I actually think we as politicians can learn an awful lot from young people. And so I would like to turn the question round and say, you tell us how we get you interested. You tell us, because politicians are terrible at doing certain things. The first is listening, the second is hearing, and the third is actually learning. So why don't you tell us? Because it's much better that you tell us what you want and we then put that in action. Because we're old fogies as far as you're concerned. University funding. I believe we have a serious problem with university funding because of the fact the states only voted it as an interim policy. That's for the next 3 to 4 years. After that, we do not know what is going to happen. I voted against that amendment to the proposition to make it an interim policy, because the only way we are going to get certainty is if we put university funding into statute law. There is a right in law for every child to go to university, and that child will be given a grant. We have to look at the level at which that grant is paid, because I think 100,000 is too high. But until we do that, I'm against loan schemes of any type. We talk about investing in education. Well, surely the biggest investment we can make is in our youth of today. That's where we need to make the investment, not in building new schools necessarily, but in the youth of today. Let's give them the chance, all of them, to go to university. Thank you.
Deputy Mezek.
Thank you for your question, Oliver. They say that young people aren't interested in politics, but I tell you, ask any young person what they think of President Donald Trump, and they will have a very interesting opinion and probably use some very interesting language to tell it to you. I think that the prospects of more politics in schools, I tell you what, I remember when I was a student, I would have found it boring as anything. So I think that education is part of the answer, but it's not the only thing. I think there's more we can do. Firstly, we need to simplify our political system. These three categories of states members elected in unequal sized constituencies where we've got all sorts of different numbers of votes is not a good way for choosing politicians. I think if we reform that and make it simpler, it will be easier to get that initial discussion about the system over and done with quickly so you can talk about the subjects, and that's what actually inspires young people. I think there's good work being done by the Youth Service about the voice of the young person, getting that more included in decision making. And I'll make one commitment to you right now. I will recommend to my political party that we change our party rules to have permanent representation from young people on our management committee so that there's at least one direct way that young people can have their voice featured in policy making. On higher education funding, I voted for the proposition to improve funding, but I too was scathing of the government for the fact that they did not provide a fully funded option. I think it would be wrong to promise young people something so special and important to them without being able to demonstrate that it's sustainable in its funding and that it won't just be cut halfway through their degree. So we must find a sustainable funding mechanism. Our proposal is based on income tax reform, moving from 2 tax calculations to 1. I know that's something that some other candidates on this panel also support. It's been verified by the Treasury. It will raise £6 million, and we can use that to fully fund university tuition. We can put some of it into lifelong learning on Ireland, and we can use some of it for the Digital Enterprise Academy. That, I think, is the way forward and provide our young people with these opportunities that they deserve.
Mr. Broder.
Thank you, Madam Councillor. Yes, a very difficult question, Oliver. To be frank, youngsters in general are not that interested in politics. I mean, look around the audience here, and what is the average age? No disrespect to everybody here this evening. You go to a polling station, it's very rare you see anybody come to vote below the age of 40. Because youngsters are generally not interested in politics until they reach the age where it begins to affect them. Taking out a mortgage, something like that. I mean, I cast my mind back to that age, and I can remember I wasn't interested in politics. I seem to remember girls and beer seemed to have a greater appeal. But the question is how to create an interest. Well, I have to say, I don't know. I would agree with Deputy Beer on this. It's really, you need to tell us. I mean, politics is what it is. It's supposed to serve everyone, including youngsters, and if they feel excluded, we need to know why. Uni funding, that's a subject I can't cover in 1 minute. I can't do it justice. I mean, both my children went to university, so I do know something about it. What subjects are being studied? Are they likely to lead to gainful employment? Will the recipient be coming back to Jersey to work, or will another jurisdiction benefit from our subsidy? What happened to apprentice schemes? Why are Jersey students' classes overseas paying more than their UK counterparts? There needs to be a full analysis of the issues before one can make a judgment on it.
Senator Farnham.
Thank you, Oliver. Can I presume you are interested in politics and not just asking the question? Well, that's good news. We can talk about teaching local politics in school, and we need to, but that should be part of the curriculum as far as I'm concerned. I think, funnily enough, my children got particularly upset with the Brexit result. They were pretty disappointed that old people had decided their future. So these sort of momentous decisions are going to involve young people. The Scottish referendum was another one, I think, involved young people. But I actually think we need to empower our young people. We need to involve them more in decision making. And when we produce a project, let's take, for example, the skateboard park. We all want a new skateboard park and other sporting and good facilities for our young people. So let's get on and do it, and let's do it properly. We're consulting with young people. But why not then give it to the young people to manage? I've got a feeling they do a better job than we would. And there's great examples of this around the world and in the UK where these schemes have been given to young people, and they've surprised everybody with their skill and ability. and then give everybody a PlayStation at the end. I'm not doing patronise, I'd like one of those as well. That would get a few interested. Monica, I think that no child should be, with academic capability, should be denied a university education because of fiscal pressure. The cost of this scheme we've got in place, and it must be made permanent, is about an additional £2.8 million. We should reprioritise existing spending to find that money. I think that's money well spent. We use and we waste plenty of money on other things. So when we start tightening the belt and better managing the public sector and expenses, let's make sure we allocate the correct amount of money to students so they can go and study, and let's find a way to bring them back as well. Thank you.
Deputy Fondre.
Monica, I think the question was about how we're going to fund it. So I am concerned actually about the sustainability of the funding we have agreed. As Lyndon Ferguson said, it is about 2.8 million, and it's only for courses starting in 2022. They're presently being funded out of savings. There isn't a sustainable mechanism in place. Then it's going to be reviewed. So I'm worried about the kind of these types of commitments and what that has on tax rises. And for me, that's where we've got to make sure we get our savings sorted out. That's where public sector reform comes in. Really critically, you've got to nail down that and demonstrate we are being efficient before we to keep the pressure on keeping tax rises down. That's my concern with open-ended commitments. At the moment, on that one, I think we're okay. I think Deputy Valois dealt with the rest of it fairly ably. Oliver, I'm doing in reverse order, but by no means least. Actually, as an observation, I think actually children of politicians and friends of politicians are children of friends of politicians do sometimes show an interest. I think my children certainly took a unwanted interest in my leaflet at times, and various critiques came in. But I think I was actually present when you attended when you did the Year 5 visit to the Assembly, and it's things like that, things like the Youth Assembly, things like the parliamentary assemblies we have, which is with the Commonwealth and the French-speaking side, where Jersey can send representation. That's a really good experience if you're a kind of late teenager type of thing to put on your CV. There's the play on Vote JE. I don't know if anybody's looked at that. It's the play that's going around the schools, which is about all the issues about how youth should, why they should be worried about politics. School assemblies are being held on this election, as I understand it. All that is really good. So engagement is getting better. Part of, I think, improving it is getting politicians actually more visible in their community. If you engage more, you can actually interact with younger people. More engagement in the school level as well, and then actually we do know we need more, but listening and being more involved with youth is definitely part of it. Thank you.
Connétable, Pallet.
Never mind young people being interested in politics. I think we're going to have to pay more attention to young voters. And why do I say that? Next time round, we'll have a digital ID and we'll have online voting, and everybody Oliver's age will be voting in their classrooms in great numbers. So I think we really need to start thinking about how we do educate Oliver and his friends and younger in how they vote and how our system works. We need to do that through schools, and we're going to need to do it through our youth service, and we need to do engaging with them face to face. So don't forget that. Online voting is coming, and it will change the whole way we vote in this island, without a doubt. In regards to university funding, at least we've got some certainty for 3 or 4 years for parents. I think that's really good. I think it's going to I think it does need to be reviewed. I think in many regards it seems to be too generous, but I don't want to see parents in huge amounts of debt. I've seen that when I've been dealing with grant appeals at education, how parents were putting themselves in huge amounts of debt, and that was wrong. With students, again, I don't want to see students with huge debts as we've seen in the UK, but I'm not against per se a student loan scheme. I think it was capped and it was reasonable, and maybe a maximum of £15,000. I think that's a reasonable sum for young people to invest in themselves. I know it's contentious, but I think if you're going to invest in a student as an island, maybe they should invest something back into the island, but you're only going to bring them back if they've got jobs to go to and they've got good affordable housing to come back to as well. So we need to remember that. But everybody said it, youth's our future, and we need to invest in them.
Thank you. I call Mr. Troy.
Yes, you're very brave going into politics. And I think we recently missed a big opportunity, really, with the skateboard park because, you know, our sixth formers, and I've seen them going down the street at about 40 miles an hour. They're our experts. They understand what they need, and the skateboard park should be placed where they think its needs are and designed the way they think it fits what they do. And we've let ourselves down here employing a consultant when we should have just gone out to you guys and said, look, what do you want, where do you want it, and what budget do you need? And it's great to have somebody young that's interested in it. And as Steve Pallet said, you know, it's going to come that you're all just sitting and voting on your phones shortly. Because to move on to the university question, I believe we need a fintech Jersey university for what's going to happen to our Jersey industries here in the financial side of things. Because a lot of people don't realize yet that the world and the way everything works, like record keeping and banking, it is all going to change. The whole thing will be completely different, and it's going to become quite automated. And the keeping of records will be automated, and I've lost where I am now. And this will create a lot of jobs, but it's also going to do away with a lot of jobs, because what people do in banks now will be automated. So we actually need to train our young people for our industry, and we need to retrain our bankers, because they're not going to be able to cope with jobs otherwise, because a lot of jobs are going to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Troy. Mr. Troy was our final speaker this evening. We have gone past 9:30, and we have had the same number of questions as other hustings in other parishes. I'd like to thank you all for attending this evening, and you may be interested to know, actually, as an aside, that Oliver did shadow me just before Christmas, so he spent some time with me as connétable in the parish, but also attended some meetings with me in my capacity as Assistant Minister for Home Affairs. So I'm very pleased to know that that hasn't put him off politics, and in fact, hopefully, has encouraged him, as it seems to have done. So thank you very much. May I just remind you, although you probably don't need to be reminded, that Election Day is, of course, Wednesday, May the 16th, and the polling station opens here at 8 in the morning and closes at 8 in the evening. I look forward to seeing as many parishioners as possible during that day, those of you who haven't pre-polled, and please take the opportunity to cast your vote.